Chapter 21. Rest and Recuperation. Well, at the same time as my family got the happy news of my liberation, I arrived in England and was carried to a field hospital on a stretcher. I was nearly unconscious, so dehydrated, emaciated, and jaundiced that the rookie nurse who removed my clothing and washed my shriveled yellow skin had to look away. The horror registered on her face, despite her best efforts to remain professional. Fortunately, the doctor had seen this all before and prescribed a perfect remedy, tea, so strong that it shriveled up my tongue. So to this day I can remember the horrible taste of it, but it had a lot of sugar in it, easily digesting calories to soothe my body and lots of caffeine to revive my spirit. In retrospect, that foul-tasting tonic probably saved my life. I was to stay for 2 weeks in the Army Hospital in England. I left Eldorado in 1943, the picture of health, standing 6'3" and weighing about 165 pounds. When they carried me into the English hospital, I weighed about 100 pounds and could not stand up straight enough for them to measure my height. I had suffered injuries and illness that would plague me my entire life. I had nothing except my army-issue pajamas. Every single thing I had ever owned was gone. When I formally listed as MIA, my personal effects had been shipped back to my mother. On the day I was to leave for the United States, I was issued a shot of whiskey to celebrate. I think it was then that I finally started to realize my hideous ordeal was over. Back home, 2 weeks had passed with no word from the War Department or me. Then my family eagerly awaited news of my condition. Got the following telegram, which was maddeningly short in detail, but nonetheless welcome. The Chief of Staff of the Army wishes to inform you, your son, Private Gerald A. Johnson, is to be coming home to the United States within the near future, and will be given an opportunity to communicate with you upon arrival if he has not done so. This report has been received in the War Department. I was so happy to be going home. I would have pinched myself if I had any flesh in my body to pinch. Still weak and unable to stand for any sustainable period of time, I was taken to a train bound for Bridgewick, Scotland. Upon arrival, I was helped aboard a 4-engine C-54 aircraft, which carried me to Newfoundland, where I boarded yet another plane. When we landed in LaGuardia, New York, I reached out my bony hand and touched the ground to make sure I was not dreaming. I spent a week in the hospital in New York, growing a tiny bit stronger each day, but still in very critical condition. One day, a volunteer visited me to see if I needed anything. I did. I had no money, no means of calling home or sending word to my family. The volunteer arranged for this telegram. I dictated and asked it to be sent to my mother. Arrived safely, new hospital, Mitchell Field. Transferred near home probably soon. Will write. Love, Gerald. My transfer was complete within a week, and my home for the next 4 months would be Chicago's Gardner General Hospital, recuperation center for hundreds of GIs during the period of time. The hospital was well equipped and the staff wonderful, but I can't say the same for the food. Creamed chicken livers was the menu of choice every single meal, every single day. The doctors meant well. They served us a steady diet of it on an attempt to restore metabolic health. Ugh. To this day, I cannot look at a chicken liver without tasting that god-awful stuff. The only good part was that it seemed to accomplish its goal. My brother Relay, who would not now have to join the service until the following October, drove my mother and father down to see me about a week after I arrived at Gardner. My parents, who had never been to Chicago, but Leroy knew his way around the city, having been there to sell Christmas trees, fresh cut in northern Wisconsin, lucratively marketed in Chicago's inner city. With Leroy as the chauffeur and at the wheel of my father's beloved 1940 Corvette, my parents made the trip despite their misgivings about travel into a large urban area. My heart leapt with joy as I saw them coming down the corridor, but as my mother came near, she did not recognize me right away, stepping first at the wrong bed. When she finally got to my bedside, she reacted to my caviar-looking appearance by fainting dead away. My father just managed to catch her, or there might have been a second Johnson listed on the final casualty report. Once she had regained her composure, my mother brought me what she said was something to look at. That was the first time I saw the scrapbook. I was too weak to do it, but so she turned the pages slowly for me, showing how she had kept the details of my service, confinement, and liberation in an inexpensive scrapbook I had started as a boy. Even now it brings me to tears to look at it. On the first few pages there are newspaper clippings of famous athletes of the time, photos that make them appear larger than life. The captions recorded their accomplishments as they were essential to human experience, as though outcomes of athletic contests were a matter of life and death. But when you turn the page of the scrapbook, and there begins a chronicle of a true life and death struggle. One I lived through and talk about very little until now. Even though she came to see me about a week after my parents did, Elaine was also shocked by my appearance and remembers it clearly to this day. About 2 weeks after Gerald got to Chicago, I came down on train with a friend. We stayed a few days with my aunt who lived in the city, so I managed to visit him several times. I will never forget the first time I saw him. I barely recognized him. He was so thin, nothing but sickly yellow skin covering bones. He was so jaundiced that even the whites of his eyes were yellow as an egg yolk. At first, I was even afraid to touch him, so I just blew him a kiss. Slowly, though, he perked up, and by the time he was discharged from the hospital in August for a 2-month home visit, he was starting to resemble an extremely thin but recognizable version of the man I had fallen in love with 2 years earlier. When I survived to return home after the war, when millions of soldiers died, as much a mystery to me as to why some survived at Christmas 2004 tsunami disaster and others' lives were snuffed out as if they were no more than bugs on a bumper. It's so arbitrary, and there's no answers unless you're a man of faith. Thanks be to God, I am. One final thought. Both the destructive power of the killer tsunami and the carnage of World War II were disasters whose horrors were documented on paper and on video in ways people had never before experienced. But there's one important difference. On December 26, 2004, Mother Nature made war upon the earth. World War II was a man-made catastrophe, one I hope and pray will never happen again.